My name is Naji Atallah. I head up the manufacturing and construction industries for Autodesk across EMEA Emerging. I have been in tech for 20 years now, half of which have been with Autodesk in Dubai. So I've had the privilege of supporting companies that designed and constructed projects like the Museum of the Future, the Qatar World Cup Stadia, the Louvre, and the Istanbul Grand Airport. As a global tech leader, we enable innovators across architecture, engineering, construction, manufacturing, and entertainment with tools to allow them to solve the world's most pressing challenges. And nothing is as pressing now as designing and building a better future for everyone. So for me, sustainability at Autodesk is threefold. One, we want to make better tools that enable our customers to design and make products and places in a better way with less environmental impact. Two, we want to enable or empower the change agents of the world with grants, software, and training in order for them to disrupt the current way we do things now. And of course, we want to lead by example. So we want to walk the walk, and we have our own sustainability initiatives across our operations and business practices. Some of the highlights that I'm really proud of is that for the second year in a row, we are a net zero greenhouse gas company that's across our operations and across our value chain. We've managed to reduce by 37% the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions from our operations as compared to financial year 20. And this means that all the electricity, all the power, all the heating and cooling across our operations have been reduced by 37%. We've achieved a reduction of 67% in our Scope 3 emissions per dollar of gross profit. So this is the emissions across our value chain. And we've issued our first sustainability bond. It's for $1 billion. And those funds will be used to make more eco-friendly products, production techniques, water, wastewater technologies, of course renewable energy technologies, and also to do a lot of social economic empowerment across where we operate. We've also completed the acquisition of Innovise for around $1 billion, and Innovise are world leaders in software for water and wastewater treatment. And of course, we continue to organically grow our portfolio of products so our customers can benefit from better sustainability credentials as they do their work. Through Autodesk Foundation as well, or their portfolio of projects, we've managed to reduce the carbon CO2 emissions worldwide by 1.4 million tons. And sustainability for us is part of a bigger impact theme, right? So we've also reported that we have now 50% women representation on our board of directors, 45% within our executive team. We've managed to increase the percentage of women in our tech roles by 19% throughout the year. Our employees have donated around 23,000 hours of their time, $2.9 million. And as a company, we've also done philanthropic donations of around $18 million and around $42 million in software donations. So worldwide now, we are witnessing a huge increase in demand for products and places, whether the product is a car, a cell phone, places being a building or a bridge. And this is driven by two things. One, it's the demographic increase in the world's population. We are closely approaching the 8 billion number, and we will cross it anytime now. The UN estimates that by 2050 we will hit 10 billion. That's from one side. From the other side, we are living in really good times. So we have more people going into middle class now than any other time in human history. And this means that we have more buying power and more demand for things. Now, technology will allow us to balance this demand for more with a reality of climate change and a reality of scarcity of material. So through the use and proper implementation of technology, we can measure and then we can control and reduce our environmental impact. And obviously this is, to be done by our customers who use our tools in order to measure that impact across the value chain. If I look at the industries where I'm really active, so manufacturing contributes around 19% of the world's current emissions, right? And by 2050, the amount of material and energy required by the manufacturing sector is only estimated to double. If I look at buildings, and I'm talking about buildings alone, not the whole built environment, 38% of energy-based emissions comes from buildings, 28 of which are in the operations of a building. So this is, lighting, cooling, the electricity that we use, and 10% comes from the actual construction of the building. So the way we see it, our customers will imagine, they will design, and they will make a lower carbon world where we have less pollution, less waste, and where the materials and the energy are used and then reused as part of a bigger circular economy. And this is where the tech company's responsibility comes in delivering better tools for the community to do this designing and building of a better world. Yes, so we're seeing more legislation that forces companies to talk about their environmental credentials in general. More interestingly, I see legislation that is forcing companies to act in a certain way. And that's good because through legislation, policymakers can catalyze change. So if I look at transportation, it contributes or generates around a fifth of the world's emissions now. And there's now legislation across many countries that will ban the sale of cars with internal combustion engines in the next decade or so. And that's really good if the policymakers have made sure that we have the grids and the infrastructure. They're ensuring that the cars of the future are much greener, right? On a bigger scale, we see countries with either firm legislation or pledges to be emissions neutral in the future. And I think the number is now over 70 countries, including the UAE, which they have a pledge of being carbon neutral by 2050. And of course, there's also softer legislation that occurs at a development level. So, I can think here of Masdar City or of NEOM or of the Red Sea Development Project. All these projects are born and conceived as carbon neutral, very sustainable places to live and work, right? So yes, there's definitely a good amount of legislation there. And what's helping this legislation is actually us as consumers, because there's an increasing number of consumers now that prefer products, whether a product is a car or a building, that is more sustainable and comes from a company with better sustainability credentials. Having a more sustainable product makes that product more appealing. And if one of the main things that companies do is deliver value to their shareholders, and value can be in many cases defined as profit or as growth, a more sustainable product driven by consumers is actually a much more appealing product to the shareholders. So this happens at a consumer level, and it happens also at a company-to-company level. And another example here from the UAE comes from Amana Investment. So Amana Investment is part of the bigger Amana group, and they're really a case study in terms of their sustainability credentials and in terms of their use of technology. So one of the differentiators for Amana is that they look at buildings as products to manufacture in a factory rather than something to construct on site. So they break down the building into modules. They make the buildings, those modules, in a factory, which is a much more controlled environment with much less waste compared to a construction site. Those modules are shipped to site, and instead of a construction process, you have an assembly process on site. So apart from less materials used, this takes a lot less workers on site. By estimates of one of their customers, the Red Sea development project, this process requires 40%, up to 40% less workers on site, right? This sustainability credential from Amana aligns with the sustainability initiatives from their customer, the Red Sea development project. And we've seen Amana win work at the coastal city of the Red Sea development project, partly because of this differentiator that they have. So across our operations, it's a continuous process, right? And to give you an example, we have a flagship event called Autodesk University. It happens once every year in the US, and it's a 3-day forum for people from across the world, over 10,000 people to gather together, share best practices, learn from classes there, and basically progress the industries that they represent forward. Now, the impact, the event has been carbon neutral for a couple of years now, for a couple of its iterations. What we've done lately is also open up that event or parts of that event virtually, so that the positive impact of people connecting and learning is not just experienced by 10,000 people there, but many other 10,000 people across the world, without adding to the environmental impact that we have. Having said that, I think what the opportunity and the challenge for us is how do we scale that mindset into construction and into manufacturing. Like I said, we're lucky to have customers who share the vision with us and put sustainability first. So when we have business priorities aligning, it's always easier to collaborate. One of the customers that I can think of here is Khatib Al Alami, which is a regional design and construction supervision powerhouse. And on one of their projects in Kuwait, where they were working on Route 30 that connects the capital, Kuwait City, to the southern areas of Fahahil and Shuaiba and continues to the Saudi border, their scope was to propose 3 design alternatives. They ended up with a design alternative which is an elevated highway, 38 kilometers long over the existing highway. Now, the interesting part is their approach. So when they started working on the project, they had 3 major challenges. The first was that they had to collaborate with and seek approvals from over 10 different stakeholders and authorities, like the Kuwait municipality, like the Ministry of Public Works, like the Ministry of Water and Electricity Works. The second challenge was that the highway crosses highly urbanized areas. So during the execution of the project, you can't stop the metro from working, right? You cannot stop utilities to those areas. So it had to be as seamless as possible. And lastly, because of the time frame, their teams in Kuwait had to work seamlessly with teams and trades in Beirut and in Cairo. So their approach was to combine different technologies together and come up with a platform that would help them implement the project. So they used a technology from Autodesk called InfraWorks, where the schematics of the project, the initial conceptual models were all put there, and they gave access to their stakeholders and to their approvers to that platform. So, people from Kuwait municipality could go anytime, check the designs, visualize it in 3D and see if it actually works. And then they enriched those models with detailed design models from Civil 3D to make sure that the new infrastructure that they are building does not conflict with existing ones. So when the project's being constructed, will not go through a water pipe that cuts water supply to a neighborhood, for example. And finally, they took all this rich data and they put it on Autodesk Construction Cloud, which meant that the different teams, whether they're in Kuwait, in Beirut, or in Cairo, have access to consume information, to create information, seamlessly at the same time. So it is as if it is one team working in one place. And here is the ingenuity of our customers in thinking of alternatives way of doing things. And because of this, Khatib and Alami estimate that the time it took them to do the schematic models and the initial designs there was slashed by 25%. And the time it took for the approvals to go and look in different disciplines at their scope of the work and approve it got also reduced by around 18%. So this is, I think, a very, very pragmatic application of technology that leads to less resources being used throughout the implementation of a project, which is, a more sustainable practice. So there's quite many examples here. One of the classic examples that I like to refer to is the Museum of the Future, right? So the Dubai Futures Foundation had this massive vision of a building that's unlike no other now. And they started by wanting to make sure that it's a LEED Platinum certified museum. So it puts it in a very, very small group of museums in the world that have the highest sustainability certification. Now, the museum has a solar farm off-site, around 4,000 kilowatt hours of energy. But even during the construction, they created a community of companies who wanted to do things better. So during the design, for example, of the structure of the building, and you may remember it before the cladding came up, you could have seen nodes on the structure. So Bureau Happold, the designer of the project, used a technique called generative design, which is just becoming a workflow in construction now, to actually reduce the amount of material, of steel on that structure by 30%. So that's 30% less material saved on the frame of that building. And for us, it's not just about reducing the material or the energy or better collaboration. It's also sometimes about completely reimagining the way things are made. And here I think of a collaboration that happened between Autodesk and Dar Al Handasa. And Dar Al Handasa are a flagship name in the Dar Group, which is a world leader in construction services. Dar and Autodesk generatively designed and additively manufactured a 2-meter long recyclable bridge. So let me drill down on this a bit. One of the intentions of the project, of the proof of concepts, was how do we reduce the amount of material that's used on that bridge, right? And using generative design, it changes the way people work. So instead of a Dar designer sitting in front of a piece of software and actually telling the software how the bridge should look, the designer describes the intent of the bridge to the algorithm. And then the algorithm goes and iterates and automates and looks in the solution space and proposes many different solutions to the designer. And then the designer's role becomes to choose the best solution out there, make sure that it is manufacturable, and then go and manufacture it. So that bridge, that model of the bridge that was generated by an algorithm fed into a 3D printer, and the 3D printer went and 3D printed the bridge from polymer reinforced plastics, which is, which could be recycled. And this is more of a proof of concept now, but it's only the beginning. Dar, expect some big announcements from Dar soon on the topic. So we're lucky that a lot of our customers actually share our visions and share our priority in putting sustainability first. And this really helps us because as a tech company, we want to scale our reach. Of course, we do our bit, right? So, we have we've had public sustainability goals for years. It's obviously a journey. We keep on tweaking them and enhancing them. But at the end of the day, to scale up, we need to work with customers and we need to enable them to do better. And here I can think of several examples, both regionally and worldwide, where customers take on sustainability initiatives. They rely on our technology. They rely on industry best practices in order to deliver projects. One of the examples that comes to mind is from Norconsult, who are a very progressive, multidisciplinary design firm out of Norway. And on one of their projects, the E39 route, which is along the west coast of Norway, one of their main focus was to reduce the emissions due to that project. And Norconsult knows that every ton of cement produced releases a ton of CO2 into the environment. So what they've done is use advanced technology from Autodesk so that along this 15-mile stretch of road, which, by the way, with different bridges and intersections, has a price tag of $500 million, they've optimized the use of concrete. They've reduced the amount of concrete used on the project. They've also used what we call a common data environment, which is a place where the different stakeholders on the project can actually collaborate without the need of generating conventional drawings. Because of these two tweaks, the way they do things to their workflows, and because of other technologies that they use, they estimated that they have reduced the amount of emissions on the project by around 20%. And this is the scale that we want.